They say high school reunions are a double-edged sword. For my wife, Liz, it was a stroll down memory lane. For me, it was a reluctant nod to nostalgia, but I agreed to go. After all, how bad could it be? The night of the event, Liz was a whirlwind. She spent hours picking out the perfect dress, something simple yet elegant, and stood in front of the mirror, checking her reflection. Her green eyes sparkled with excitement, her auburn hair curled into soft waves that framed her face. She looked stunning, and I couldn't help but smile. "Stop staring," she teased, catching me in the act. "Can't help it," I replied. "You look beautiful." Her smile faltered for just a moment, and she busied herself with her earrings. "We should leave soon." When we arrived at the venue, the room was buzzing with laughter and chatter. Familiar faces, though slightly older and softer around the edges, greeted us with warmth. We wove through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and sharing polite smiles. Then it happened. "Lizzie." A voice called from across the room, warm and rich with surprise. Liz turned, and her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Oh my God, Ethan." Ethan. The name was like a jolt to my stomach, though I'd never met him. Liz had mentioned him in passing, a high school boyfriend, charming and charismatic, the one that got away. And there he was, tall and confident, with an easy smile that seemed to draw her in. I hung back as they embraced, the kind of hug that lingers just a second too long. "Ethan, this is my husband, Mike," she introduced, finally turning to me. He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Mike. You're a lucky guy." "Yeah, I know," I said, gripping his hand a little tighter than necessary. Liz laughed, but there was an edge to it, like she was nervous. The evening wore on, and I found myself playing the role of the quiet observer. Liz and Ethan's conversations were peppered with laughter and shared memories, their connection undeniable. I kept telling myself it was harmless. Old friends catching up. That's all it was. Right? But something about the way she leaned in when he spoke, the way her fingers brushed his arm as they laughed, made my chest tighten. When the night ended, Liz couldn't stop talking about Ethan. "Can you believe he's still single?" she said on the drive home, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place. Nostalgia? Regret? I tried to brush it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I didn't know then that this reunion wasn't the end of something harmless, it was the beginning of a storm that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. A few days after the reunion, I noticed a change in Liz. She seemed lighter, happier, humming to herself as she went about her day. At first, I chalked it up to the nostalgia of reconnecting with old friends. But then I saw it, the unmistakable glow of her phone screen reflected in her eyes as she smiled at something. "Who's that?" I asked casually one evening, nodding toward her phone. "Oh, just Ethan," she said, her tone nonchalant, but the faint blush in her cheeks told a different story. "We were talking about the reunion. He sent me some pictures of the group. I tried not to let it bother me. It was innocent, right? Sharing pictures, reminiscing, it was all part of the reunion buzz." Still, a gnawing unease settled in my gut. The next few days, the phone seemed to be glued to her hand. She'd be laughing quietly at her screen, typing quickly, and then putting the phone face down when I walked into the room. When I asked her about it, she'd wave it off. "It's nothing, Mike. Just some group chats. You know how people get after reunions." I didn't push. I wanted to trust her, I did trust her, but something felt off. One night, as we lay in bed, her phone buzzed again. She reached for it instinctively, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. I caught a glimpse of the name before she angled it away, Ethan. I turned to face the wall, pretending not to notice, but my mind raced. Why was she texting him so late? Was I overthinking it? I wrestled with the questions until sleep finally took me. The next morning, I decided to let it go. Liz and I had been married for 7 years. We had built a life together, a home, and I believed in us. People could reconnect with old friends without it meaning something sinister. But then I saw the text. It happened purely by accident. Liz had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was out for a morning jog. A notification popped up as I walked by, and before I could stop myself, my eyes darted to the screen. "Ethan, I can't stop thinking about the way you laughed that night." It felt like old times, didn't it? My heart sank. This wasn't just catching up. This wasn't harmless nostalgia. This was something else entirely. When Liz came back from her jog, flushed and breathless, I wanted to confront her. But the words got caught in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if this was just my insecurity talking? So, I said nothing. Instead, I began to watch. And wait. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Liz and I had always had an easy rhythm, a connection built on trust. But now, there was an invisible wall between us, one she seemed determined to keep in place. Her phone, once left casually on the coffee table or kitchen counter, was now always with her. She turned off notifications, claiming they were distracting. And when she wasn't actively using it, it was face down, as if to shield its secrets. I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what I kept repeating, anyway. But paranoia doesn't explain the changes in behavior, the sudden, frequent trips to the gym, the new clothes, or the way she'd seem to drift off in the middle of our conversations, her mind clearly elsewhere. One Saturday evening, I decided to test the waters. "Hey, how about a date night?" I suggested, keeping my tone light. "It's been a while since we went out, just the two of us." Liz hesitated, her eyes darting to her phone. "Oh, I'd love to, but..." "I already made plans with Sandra," she said, naming one of her coworkers. "She's going through some stuff, and I promised I'd be there for her." I nodded, masking my disappointment. "Sure, another time." But as the night wore on, I couldn't let it go. Something about her excuse didn't sit right with me. Sandra was a casual acquaintance, not someone Liz would usually prioritize over our time together. And when Liz left the house that night, she looked different. More polished. Perfume, makeup, her hairstyle just so. It wasn't the look of someone heading out for a heart-to-heart with a friend. It was the look of someone heading to see someone else. I stayed up late, pretending to work but really just stewing in my thoughts. Around midnight, Liz came home, her cheeks flushed and her smile too wide. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, setting her purse down. "Sandra just needed to vent, you know." One drink turned into 3, and we lost track of time. I nodded, playing along. "Did you have fun?" "It wasn't about fun," she said quickly, a little too defensively. She needed support. That's all. Her words didn't match her expression, an almost giddy glow that made my stomach churn. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started to pay closer attention. The next morning, I checked our shared calendar and saw an event Liz had added for later that week, dinner with Sandra. Another excuse? I wasn't sure. But as the days passed, my suspicions only grew. Liz became more secretive, more careful, but there were cracks in her facade. A slip of the tongue here, an unexplained absence there. And then there were the phone calls, one she'd take in the other room, her voice low and hushed. Every time I walked in, she'd hang up or quickly switch to texting. I started noticing patterns. Her so-called nights out with Sandra or gym sessions always coincided with moments when she seemed happiest, almost radiant. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening, and it wasn't innocent. I needed proof. So one night, when Liz was in the shower, I finally did what I'd been resisting for weeks. I picked up her phone. It was locked, of course, but we'd always shared our passwords. I tried her usual one, our anniversary. It didn't work. A knot tightened in my chest. She'd changed it. Liz changing her phone password felt like a slap in the face. We'd always been open with each other, shared everything. But now, it was as if she'd built a fortress to keep me out. I tried to rationalize it. People change their passwords all the time, right? But deep down, I knew this was different. That night, as Liz slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions, each more painful than the last. Was she hiding something? Or worse, someone? The next morning, I decided to take a more direct approach, without tipping my hand. "Hey, Liz," I said over breakfast, keeping my tone casual. "I tried to use your phone last night to check the weather app, but it didn't unlock. Did you change your password?" Her fork paused mid-air. "Oh, yeah," she said, too quickly. "I had to. You know how it is with all those data breaches lately. Better safe than sorry." "Of course," I said, nodding. "What is it now?" "I might need it for something when you're not around." Her hesitation was brief but telling. It's our old house number," she said, forcing a smile. "You remember it, right?" I nodded, but the damage was done. Her answer felt rehearsed, like she'd anticipated the question. I didn't push further, but the seeds of doubt were growing faster than I could manage. Over the next few days, I started to dig, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. Her behavior wasn't adding up, and I needed clarity. It started small. I checked our bank statements. Most of it seemed normal, but there were a few odd charges, restaurants I didn't recognize, purchases at boutiques I knew she didn't frequent. When I asked about them, Liz brushed it off. "Oh, those were just gifts for Sandra," she'd said, smiling. "She's been having a tough time." Sandra again. The perfect cover. Then, one evening, while Liz was in the shower, I decided to check her laptop. She rarely used it, preferring her phone for everything, but I thought I might find something, a clue, anything. Her email was logged in. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the invasion, but my curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on her inbox and searched for Ethan. There it was. Dozens of emails, some dating back to the day after the reunion. Most of them were mundane, old pictures from high school, updates about mutual friends, but one thread caught my attention. The subject line read, "Last night." My heart raced as I clicked on it. The email was from Ethan, sent 2 days ago. "Liz. I can't stop thinking about how much fun we had. It felt like old times, didn't it? I've missed this side of you, the laughter, the spark. Can't wait for the next time. Ethan. Fun. Old times. Next time." My chest tightened as I scrolled down to see her reply. "Ethan. Last night was amazing. I didn't realize how much I needed to feel that way again. Thank you for reminding me. Let's be careful, though. Mike doesn't suspect anything, but I don't want to take any risks. Liz." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with disbelief. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was real. Liz, the woman I'd built my life with, was hiding something far deeper than I'd imagined. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop and put it back in its place. When Liz came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, she smiled at me as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I had proof now. But the question was, what would I do with it? The email sat like a weight on my chest, its words etched into my mind. Liz wasn't just reconnecting with Ethan, she was reliving something with him, something that had no place in our marriage. But how do you confront the person you've built a life with, knowing it might tear everything apart? For a few days, I carried the secret alone, quietly observing Liz while pretending everything was normal. It was agonizing, watching her go about her day as if nothing had changed, all while I was drowning in doubt and anger. I needed to confront her, but not without a plan. I decided to gather more evidence, not because I needed it for myself, but because I wanted to be prepared for her denials. If she tried to gaslight me, I'd have proof. The first step was installing a small tracking app on her phone. It wasn't something I'd ever imagined doing, but I needed to know where she was going during her increasingly frequent absences. I slipped the software onto her device one evening when she fell asleep on the couch, the TV murmuring in the background. My hands shook as I worked quickly, feeling both shame and desperation. The next few days were illuminating. Liz's gym nights didn't lead to the fitness center, they ended at a cozy little wine bar on the other side of town. Once, she even spent hours at a park, where I suspected she was meeting Ethan. My heart clenched every time her location pinged somewhere unexpected. The second step was accessing her digital calendar again. It was synced to her laptop, and I'd already seen evidence of her lies there. This time, I found a new event scheduled for Friday night, dinner with Sandra. That was the cover, but I had a feeling it was really another meeting with Ethan. I decided that Friday would be the day. No more waiting. No more watching. I'd confront her when she came home. On the evening of the supposed dinner, Liz dressed up more than usual. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, and she wore a dress I hadn't seen in years. "You look great," I said, forcing a smile. "Big night?" "Just trying to cheer Sandra up," she said, brushing past me. "Don't wait up, okay?" I watched her leave, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. My jaw tightened as I stared at the door long after it closed. While she was gone, I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say. How do you confront someone about something so deeply personal, so utterly shattering, without letting the rage consume you? I didn't know if I could. All I knew was that I had to try. At around midnight, Liz's location pinged at the wine bar again. 10 minutes later, it showed her heading home. I sat on the couch, the room dimly lit, as I waited for her return. When she walked through the door, her cheeks were flushed, her smile brighter than it had been in weeks. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down. "Still up?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice even. "How was your dinner?" "Oh, it was nice," she said quickly, almost dismissively. "Sandra's feeling a lot better now." I nodded, standing up. "That's good. Glad to hear it. But Liz, we need to talk." Her smile faltered. "Talk about what?" "About Ethan. And the emails. And all these dinners with Sandra that don't exist." Her face froze, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak but no words came out. For the first time, Liz seemed truly at a loss. And for the first time, I knew there was no going back. Liz stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to summon an explanation that wouldn't come. The air between us felt heavy, charged with all the words I was too afraid to say, and all the ones she clearly didn't want to. "What are you talking about?" she finally managed, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "Don't do that," I said, my voice firm but low. "Don't pretend like you don't know. I've seen the emails, Liz. I know you've been meeting Ethan." Her face drained of color, and she took a shaky step back, as if the distance might somehow shield her from the truth. "Mike, it's not what you think," she said quickly, her voice rising. I was just catching up with an old friend. That's all." I scoffed, the bitter sound escaping before I could stop it. "Catching up? Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back, lying about where you're going, and sending him emails about how amazing last night was?" Liz's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But instead, her expression hardened, and she crossed her arms defensively. "You went through my emails," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. "How dare you invade my privacy like that?" I took a step closer, my fists clenching at my sides. Don't turn this around on me, Liz. I wouldn't have had to go looking if you hadn't been hiding something. I wasn't hiding, she started, but I cut her off. Then why did you change your phone password? Why are you meeting him at wine bars and parks instead of telling me the truth? She looked away, her lips pressing into a tight line. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second dragging out the silence between us. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and sank into the armchair by the window. It just happened, she whispered, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear her. I didn't plan for this, Mike. I didn't mean for it to go this far. My chest felt like it was caving in. Go this far? I echoed. So it's true, then. You've been, what? Seeing him? Sleeping with him? Liz buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, her words muffled. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to, I stopped, unable to even finish the sentence. The anger I'd been holding back came rushing to the surface, and my voice rose. Liz, you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months. How could you not mean to hurt me? I didn't know what else to do, she snapped, her head jerking up. Her tears were flowing freely now, but there was a fire in her eyes, a mix of guilt and defiance. I felt like I'd lost myself, Mike. After all these years, after everything we've been through, I didn't know who I was anymore. So you turned to him? My voice cracked, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. You didn't think to talk to me? To work on us? She shook her head, looking down at her hands. It wasn't about you, she said softly. It was about me. Ethan, he made me feel alive again. Like the person I used to be before everything got so comfortable. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I'd always thought comfortable was a good thing, a sign that we'd built something solid, something lasting. But to her, it was suffocating. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the life we built together crumbling around us. Liz reached out, as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back, shaking my head. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike, please, she started, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't, I said. I need time. I can't do this right now. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, the sound of her sobs echoing in my ears as I left. I drove aimlessly that night, my thoughts swirling in a storm of anger, confusion, and pain. The betrayal wasn't just about Liz seeing Ethan, it was about the cracks in our foundation I hadn't seen. Or maybe I'd ignored them, believing love could fill the gaps forever. Eventually, I found myself parked at the beach, the waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. I leaned back in the driver's seat, letting the sound wash over me. For a moment it was almost enough to dull the ache in my chest. Almost. Liz's words kept replaying in my mind, he made me feel alive again. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that she'd been searching for something I didn't even know she'd lost. How long had she felt this way? How had I missed it? The hours passed, and I watched the horizon turn from black to gray to the pale orange of dawn. My phone buzzed on the dashboard, breaking the stillness. It was a text from Liz. I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. But please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. I didn't feel ready to face her, but I couldn't avoid her forever. Eventually, I typed back, later. When I finally returned home, the house was eerily quiet. Liz was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair was a mess, her eyes puffy and red. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of what had happened. You didn't sleep here last night, she said, her voice small. I couldn't, I replied flatly, setting my keys on the counter. I needed space. Liz nodded, looking down at her coffee. I understand. I stood there, waiting for her to say something, anything, to explain what had happened. But she stayed silent, the air between us thick with tension. Finally, I broke the silence. Why, Liz? I asked, my voice cracking despite my effort to stay composed. Why him? Why now? She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. I don't have a good answer, she said. It just happened. Seeing Ethan at the reunion brought back all these memories, and I guess I got caught up in them. He reminded me of a time when things were simpler, when I didn't feel so. She trailed off, searching for the right word. Comfortable? I finished for her, bitterness creeping into my tone. Her face crumpled. It's not an excuse, Mike. I know that. But I've felt so lost lately, and I didn't know how to tell you. Ethan, he was a distraction. A mistake. I realize that now. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. Do you? Because this wasn't just some fleeting mistake, Liz. You lied to me. You hid things. You went out of your way to betray me. I know, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I hate myself for it. But it's over, Mike. I ended it. I told Ethan I can't see him anymore. The words should have brought some relief, but they didn't. Why now? I asked. Because I found out? Or because you actually regret it? Liz flinched, her hands gripping the mug tighter. Both, she admitted. I don't want to lose you, Mike. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I wanted to believe her, I wanted to believe that we could somehow salvage what we'd built. But I didn't know if I could. I don't know, Liz, I said, my voice hollow. I don't know if I can get past this. She sobbed quietly into her hands as I turned and walked upstairs, the sound of her heartbreak following me. The days that followed felt like walking on shattered glass. Every conversation with Liz was tentative, every moment charged with unspoken tension. We tried to keep things normal for the sake of appearances, but the cracks in our relationship were impossible to ignore. I avoided her as much as I could, throwing myself into work and spending longer hours at the office. At home, we spoke only when necessary, short, clipped exchanges that barely scratched the surface of our lives. The warmth that once defined our relationship had been replaced by a cold, uncomfortable distance. Liz, for her part, was trying. I could see it in the little things, the way she lingered when we spoke, hoping I'd say something meaningful. The way she cooked my favorite meals, even though I could barely eat. The way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, her eyes full of regret. But I couldn't bring myself to meet her halfway. Not yet. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, her phone on the coffee table in front of her. The screen was lit up with a text notification, and though I tried not to look, the name Ethan was unmistakable. My stomach twisted. Another message from him? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Liz's head snapped up, her face a mixture of guilt and frustration. No, she said quickly. It's not like that. He wanted to check on me. Check on you? I laughed bitterly. He has no right to check on you. Not anymore. I didn't respond, Mike, she said, standing up. I told you, it's over. I blocked his number after he sent that. I don't want anything more to do with him. Her words hung in the air, but I couldn't tell if they were meant to reassure me or herself. Good, I said coldly. Because I don't think I could take it if you did. Liz stepped closer, her hands trembling. I meant what I said, Mike. I want to fix this. I want to fix us. But I can't do it alone. I need you to tell me what to do. I shook my head, my frustration bubbling over. I don't know what to tell you, Liz. You shattered my trust. You lied to me. You betrayed me. How am I supposed to just move past that? Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out, but I stepped back. Please, she whispered. Tell me what you need. I need time, I said firmly. And I need space. Liz nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, she said softly. I'll give you whatever you need. But as I watched her retreat to the bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that time and space weren't going to be enough. The foundation of our marriage felt irreparably damaged, and I didn't know if I had the strength, or the will, to rebuild it. The tension between Liz and me continued to simmer in the days that followed, but we put on a united front when the invitations arrived for a family dinner at my sister's house. Canceling would have raised questions we weren't ready to answer, so we agreed to go. The night arrived, and I plastered on my best neutral expression as Liz and I walked into the cozy, bustling house. My sister, Emma, greeted us with her usual warmth, pulling us both into a hug. You two look great, she said, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Liz smiled politely, but her grip on my hand was tighter than usual. I wasn't sure if it was for reassurance or fear of what might happen if she let go. Dinner started smoothly enough. Family chatter filled the room, kids running around, and the comforting aroma of home-cooked food wafted from the kitchen. I tried to focus on the conversations, nodding along to my brother-in-law's stories and laughing at my nephew's antics, but my mind was elsewhere. And then it happened. As dessert was being served, a familiar voice rang out from across the room. Mike? Liz? I turned, my stomach dropping like a lead weight. There he was, Ethan. He was standing in the doorway, holding a bottle of wine and looking as smug as ever. My sister beamed. Ethan. So glad you could make it. My pulse thundered in my ears. Of course. Ethan was an old family friend, he and Emma had stayed in touch over the years, even as I'd lost contact. I'd completely forgotten that connection. Or maybe I'd blocked it out, wanting to believe I'd never have to see him again. Liz froze beside me, her face pale. Ethan's eyes flicked to her, and for the briefest moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was all I needed to see. Ethan, I said, my voice tight. Didn't expect to see you here. He grinned, as if oblivious to the tension. Emma mentioned a family dinner. Thought I'd drop by and catch up. The room seemed to close in on me. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Liz, can I talk to you? Outside. Now. The chatter around the table quieted, and my sister looked up, confused. Mike? Is everything okay? Fine, I said quickly, my voice betraying my anger. We just need a minute. Liz hesitated, but I didn't give her a choice. I walked to the backyard, barely waiting for her to follow. When the door clicked shut behind us, I spun to face her. What the hell is he doing here? I demanded, my voice low but sharp. I didn't know, Liz stammered, her eyes wide with panic. I swear, Mike. I didn't know he'd be here. You expect me to believe that? I snapped. You really didn't think to mention that my sister is still friends with the guy you've been sneaking around with? Tears filled her eyes, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. Mike, I didn't plan this. I had no idea. Ethan's voice interrupted us, smooth and unbothered. Is this a private conversation, or can anyone join? I turned to see him standing in the doorway, a smirk playing on his lips. It took every ounce of restraint not to lash out. Get out of here, Ethan, I growled. This isn't your place. He stepped closer, his hands raised in mock surrender. Relax, Mike. I didn't come here to cause trouble. Too late for that, I shot back. Liz reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Mike, please, she pleaded. Let's just go back inside and... No, I interrupted. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine. Not with him here. Ethan chuckled softly, and the sound made my blood boil. Mike, if you're this upset, maybe you should be asking yourself why. That was it. I lunged forward, but Liz stepped between us, her hands on my chest. Stop, she cried. Both of you. Just stop. I stared at Ethan over her shoulder, my chest heaving with anger. This isn't over, I said through gritted teeth. But as we re-entered the house, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to move forward, or if this was the beginning of the end. The car ride home was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Liz sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring out the window, while I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed the evening on a loop, Ethan's smirk, Liz's stammered denials, my sister's confused concern. The final straw had been Ethan's parting shot as we left, "Take care, Liz. It was great seeing you." His tone was loaded, almost taunting, and I'd had to physically stop myself from turning back. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Liz opened her door without waiting for me and walked inside. I followed, slamming the door behind me harder than I intended. "Do you see now?" I said, my voice breaking the silence. "Do you see what you've done?" Liz spun around, her eyes blazing. "What I've done?" "Mike, I didn't invite him. I didn't even know he'd be there. That doesn't change the fact that he's in our lives because of you." I snapped, my anger bubbling over. "He's here because you couldn't let go of whatever it was you thought you had with him." Her face crumpled, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Do you even understand what it felt like? Sitting there, watching him saunter in like he belonged. Watching him look at you like, my voice cracked, and I turned away, running a hand through my hair. "You let him into our lives, Liz. You did that." "I didn't plan this," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear to you, Mike, I didn't. And I told you, it's over. I haven't seen him, I haven't talked to him. I can't control what Emma does. That's the problem, isn't it?" I said bitterly, facing her again. "You can't control anything about this anymore. You let it spiral out of control, and now we're both stuck cleaning up your mess." Liz's tears started to fall, but this time they didn't soften me. "I'm trying, Mike," she whispered. "I'm trying to fix this. But you," she stopped, shaking her head. "You won't even let me. All you do is throw it back in my face." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "You don't get to play the victim here, Liz. You broke us. And I don't know if we can ever be whole again." Her face twisted with pain, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, with a shaky breath, she stepped closer. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice quiet but raw. "Tell me, Mike. What do I need to do to fix this?" I shook my head, my anger giving way to exhaustion. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if you can." The words hung between us, heavy and final. Liz wiped her tears and nodded slowly, as if accepting a sentence she couldn't appeal. "Okay," she said softly. "Then maybe I should go." I blinked, startled by the suggestion. "Go where?" "To my sister's," she said. "Just for a few days." "Maybe you're right. Maybe we need space." I wanted to argue, to tell her that running away wouldn't solve anything, but the truth was, I didn't have the energy to stop her. "Fine," I said, stepping aside. "Do what you need to do." Liz disappeared upstairs to pack, leaving me alone in the quiet of the living room. When she came back down, her suitcase in hand, she paused at the door. "I love you, Mike," she said, her voice breaking. "And I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't. As the door closed behind her, I sank onto the couch, the weight of everything crashing down on me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was truly alone. And for the first time, I had to confront the possibility that I might stay that way. The house was suffocatingly quiet after Liz left. For the first time in years, I was completely alone, with nothing but my thoughts to keep me company. The anger I had been clinging to like a shield began to waver, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I wandered aimlessly from room to room, the silence punctuated only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of Liz, our wedding photo on the mantel, her favorite mug on the kitchen counter, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the bedroom. It felt like a ghost of our life together, haunting every corner. That night, I slept on the couch. Or at least, I tried to. My mind wouldn't let me rest. I kept replaying everything, the reunion, the texts, the dinner, her tearful apology. I hated how much I still loved her, even after everything. How much I wanted to believe that we could somehow fix this. The next morning, I woke up to the sunlight streaming through the blinds and a new determination. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. If there was any chance of salvaging what we had, I needed to face it head-on. And if there wasn't, then I needed to let her go. I called Liz. She picked up on the first ring. "Mike?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Can you come home?" I asked. "We need to talk." She didn't hesitate. "I'll be there soon." When Liz walked through the door an hour later, she looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were puffy, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and she clutched her keys tightly in her hand as if bracing herself for bad news. "Thanks for calling," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "I wasn't sure if you would." I gestured for her to sit, and we both sank into the couch, leaving a careful space between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "About everything. About us." Liz nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I have too. I need to say this," I continued, holding up a hand before she could interrupt. "What you did, it broke something in me. It broke something in us. And I don't know if that's something we can fix." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks, but she stayed silent, letting me continue. "But," I said, my voice softening, "I also know that I don't want to throw away 7 years of marriage without trying. I love you, Liz. And I think part of me always will. But if we're going to move forward, things have to change. You have to change." "I will," she said quickly, her voice cracking. "I swear, Mike. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. I just want to make this right." Her desperation was raw, but I could see the sincerity in her eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. "We'll try," I said finally. "But it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to happen overnight." Liz nodded, reaching for my hand. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I mean it." I hesitated for a moment, then took her hand. It felt small and fragile in mine, like it might break if I squeezed too hard. "We'll take it one day at a time," I said. "But this is your last chance, Liz. No more lies. No more excuses. If you ever betray me again, that's it. We're done." "I won't," she promised, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll prove it to you." The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's been shattered, and part of me still wondered if we could ever truly recover. But for now, we were still standing. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again.